What's the first thing you'd feel if you were a servant in ancient Egypt? It's not glory or grandeur. It's the biting chill of a stone floor and the smell of oil-soaked linen. This is not just history. This is your life. Let me show you what it truly meant to exist in the Pharaoh's shadow. You wake before the world stirs, long before the Nile's mist begins to shimmer with the first hints of sunlight. The stars remain fixed in their cold brilliance above the dark horizon, a silent audience to your movements. Around you, the servant quarters sit in heavy stillness. The small room's mud brick walls trap the chill of the desert night, and the woven reed mat beneath you offers little comfort from the hard ground. You share this space not only with your cousin, who always rises at the same moment as you, but with the unspoken weight of obligation. To be late even once could mean far more than a scolding. You've heard the stories of punishments. They lodge firmly in your mind, sitting parallel with the ever-present prayers that you would not be next. The first task is always the hardest. The fire pit must be ready before any other movements in the palace even begin. Carefully, with fingers that have already gained their share of burns from other sleepless mornings, you rebuild the embers from yesterday's coals. The ritual is quiet, deliberate. You crouch low, blowing gently to coax the first flickers of heat to life, because cold water in the palace is not an option. Your success will determine much of what follows. Though we think of Egypt as a land of relentless heat, the hours before sunrise feel almost foreign. A sharp chill settles into the stones around you and bites through your thin linen tunic. It's practical, unadorned, and just loose enough to move as you work, but the fabric offers no defense against the cold. You pull the edge close to your skin as if that might help, even though the effort always ends in futility. Movement becomes your only source of warmth, and with the fire lit and the tasks underway, you have no choice but to rely on it. Your stomach might grumble in protest at this point, but no one eats yet. Instead, you chew on a piece of dried sycamore fig, hidden away from the pantry supplies but never truly savored. The taste is woody, bitter, a faint whisper of sweetness beneath it. But it serves only to make your belly quiet. To falter mid-task, to lose focus, that is not an option. You bite down, not because of hunger, but because it is easier to block out thoughts of food when your teeth meet resistance. Just outside, faint sounds from near the Nile hint at the stirring of animals considered sacred. The honking of geese carries through the breeze, only just audible. Everyone knows these creatures aren't for eating. They serve another purpose entirely, their behavior seen as an early judgment on the day to come. When they're calm, the outlook feels safer. You hope they stay calm. Your eyes may travel toward the stars while you work, but not as a distraction. It's impossible not to think of what you've been taught, how they are more than celestial points scattered across the heavens. Each one guides the spirits of the dead, sailing through the sky alongside Ra, the great sun god. They are watching, in a way, though acknowledgement of that fact is brief. After all, there is too much to do. To keep your hands steady and your thoughts focused, a hum rises in your throat. It's not intentional, just a rhythm that finds you. A work song handed down through countless mornings like this one. How old is it, really? Hard to say. You learn to sing it as instinctively as you learn to breathe, almost as if it were a birthright. There's a strange knowledge that lingers quietly at the corners of your mind. Even beyond this life, you might not stop. When some servants die, they are buried with clay figurines meant to stand in for them, performing their duties even in the afterlife. A fact passed down not as a cautionary tale, but simply as the way things are. The first step inside the palace jolts you awake more than anything else. The cold from the polished stone hits the soles of your feet instantly, sharp and unforgiving. Every hallway gleams faintly under the pre-dawn light. The smoothness of the floors, a testament to the labor of servants like you who scrub them daily. These stones hold no warmth, not even in the height of summer when the sun scorches the outside world. Indoors, it's as if the chill is part of the stone itself, a constant reminder that comfort is not meant for you. You wouldn't dare wear sandals. Only those of status, nobles, priests, and lesser officials, can walk with even the most modest ornamentation on their feet. Your bare soles are deliberate, a silent symbol of your place within this world. To no one but yourself, they whisper, silent, submissive, replaceable. And so, you step lightly, carefully. It's instinctive after years of practice, as natural as breathing. Any misstep could be misinterpreted by watching eyes, or worse, echoed through the corridors louder than any shout. The palace floor isn't just stone. Some paths are simple, smoothed rock, while others are inlaid with patterns of divine significance. You've learned to recognize them, all servants do. To step on a wrong carving could mean sacrilege. A symbol of Ma'at, the goddess of truth and balance, is embedded into the hallway leading to the throne room. Avoiding the symbolic ostrich feather marking Ma'at's position has become second nature. Your steps are rehearsed, careful, like those of someone navigating a sacred game board. The smell of limestone lingers more heavily here than outside, mingling with faint traces of oil and incense that seem to live permanently in these walls. Dust, carried in by laborers and drafts, settles as the palace sleeps, leaving its film across the stone. It must be cleared away before the priests of the day begin their rituals. The paths, near the sanctuaries especially, must appear untouched, worthy of the divine beings who claim spiritual dominion over these spaces. As you pass one of the grand painted columns, you glance up, just briefly. The images spiraling upward from its base are a blur of history. Each morning, your eyes inevitably catch on the same chipped falcon eye, the god Horus carved into the surface centuries ago. Somehow, it always appears to look right at you. The nicked portion of the eye draws your attention without fail, though you know better than to reach out and touch it for reassurance. A foolish thought. If luck is to find you, it will find you regardless of whether or not you touch sacred things. The silence of these halls has a rhythm all its own. You've memorized every pattern of creaking tiles, echoes, and deadened footsteps. This knowledge protects you, allows you to stay unnoticed, unheard, unseen, unless you are meant to be the focus. One loud step, after all, can mean more than just embarrassment. It can mean oversight from someone who has the authority to ask questions about your presence, or worse, to punish you for it. You've seen the palace engineers' designs. Subtle cracks and grooves lead to hidden drainage systems in the floors. During certain ceremonies, libations of water and wine disappear through these cracks, or, as you've been told, they carry away blood from sacrifices without staining the holiest of spaces. You can't help but wonder what else these ancient drains have swallowed over the years. There are stories you won't forget, ones whispered to keep servants cautious. A man in his 30s slipped near the harem wing, falling on his hip with a crack so loud it echoed through the corridor. He was carried away and no one ever saw him again. Dismissed? Sent to the labor pits? Or something worse? No one dares say, yet no one has forgotten. And so, your cold feet tread carefully. Every step matters. In these halls, the weight of a single mistake follows you forever. Before the palace begins to stir, you find yourself in the storeroom, surrounded by the tools of your trade. Bundles of finely woven linen stacked on wooden shelves. Alabaster jars sealed tightly against dust, and the faint, lingering smell of oil. Everything serves a purpose, as do you. You're not even a name here, just a pair of hands meant to carry sacred objects through sacred halls. The storeroom, though quiet, hums with the unspoken weight of this responsibility. Each item you pick up is a reminder that your value lies not in what you think or feel, but in how perfectly you obey. The linen comes first, crisp, white, and cool to the touch. It's more than fabric. It's sacred, spun and bleached by temple women to reflect purity itself. You've been taught to handle it with precision, folding it so neatly that no thread dares to step out of line. A single wrinkle could ripple out into an accusation of disrespect, not just to the palace, but to Ma'at, the goddess of balance and order. As you carry the linen, your arms feel its lightness, but your mind knows the weight of the consequences attached to it. This isn't just palace protocol, it's the divine expectation. Next come the alabaster jars of oil, pulled carefully from their places on the shelves. They feel warm despite the cool air, a testament to the tightly sealed contents within. Each oil has its scent and purpose, and by now, you can recognize them all. Lotus oil for royalty with its rich floral sweetness that clings to the air. Myrrh for ritual, heavier and earthy with the faintest hint of bitterness. Cedar oil, sharper, reserved for masking the unpleasant smells that sometimes follow death. You know these oils so well you could identify them blindfolded. Mixing them or misplacing one would be unthinkable. The wrong oil could insult the pharaoh, or worse, the gods. It's not your place to touch the pharaoh with these oils. That role belongs to servants of a higher rank. But the preparation falls to you. The bowl you select must be clean and properly warmed. The oil can contain no debris, no grit that might irritate the pharaoh's skin. Even a single speck would be an insult to the divine perfection he embodies. A senior servant once told you, almost in a whisper, "The pharaoh is not a man, he is a god pretending to be one." His garments, his scent, his skin, all must reflect this illusion seamlessly. And you are the invisible hand crafting his divinity. When dressing anyone of rank, you follow strict instructions. Sashes must be tied precisely, and your eyes must remain low. Even when crouched at waist height, adjusting the fabric, you've been taught never to look up. A glance could mean anything, a challenge to power, or worse, an unintended message of familiarity. Both can lead to trouble. You focus instead on the work, on the repetitive motions of tying, folding, and adjusting until everything looks perfect. And then, you quickly step back unseen. While you fold linen by the stack, your lips whisper the chants meant to accompany each hand movement. These words are so old that few servants understand their full meanings anymore. But to forget them would set you apart in the wrong way, too careless, too unfit. The chants are not for you, after all, but for the balance of the palace itself. You've even handled the paste Egyptians use as deodorant. Made from ground carob pods and incense resin, it smells faintly sweet, pleasant enough for those allowed to wear it. But it stains terribly if spilled. You learned that firsthand during your first week here, trying to clean it off a storeroom shelf and realizing some traces never leave. Mistakes, permanent ones, are a lesson you learn fast. Nothing here is disposable. Linen scraps that can no longer be used are collected and burned in temple fires or saved for wrapping holy objects. Waste is a sin. You remember a boy who once burned a piece of linen without permission, too careless to ask beforehand. The priest's warning still echoes. His soul will itch for eternity. Whether you believe it or not, you take no risks. Each day is the same routine. You fold, pour, adjust, and perform without question. The pharaoh will never notice your hands, but if you slip, your failure will fill the halls louder than any shout. And so, you move forward, purposeful and unshaken by the weight you carry in your arms. For now, that is enough. The palace stretches around you, vast and labyrinthine, a stone maze pulsing with silent activity. It breathes through its corridors, and you are its blood, moving quickly and invisibly through the narrow paths meant only for servants. These passages are not meant for show. They are tight, hidden, and practical. Small doorways lead to even smaller staircases, feeding into hallways nearly forgotten by anyone except those who sweep, clean, or carry. To an outsider, these routes would seem chaotic, deliberately misleading. But you know them better than the scribes know their papyrus scrolls. Not from scrolls or maps, but from memory built in your legs and feet. You don't count the steps anymore, you feel them. The path from the linen storeroom to the queen's antechamber? That's 17 paces, turning sharp left at the Painted Falcon. The narrow back door to the kitchens? You don't push, you slide it open while twisting upward. Certain wall panels move with a slight shove, designed for quick entry, but you learned early which ones groan loudly under pressure and give you away. Even the shadows are familiar. Certain corners allow you to vanish entirely for a breath if a noble or guard passes unexpectedly. Under the constant eyes of the palace, this knowledge is your most valuable defense. When you enter the royal halls, your lips press together. You are not to speak unless commanded. Every servant learns this. But silence does not mean isolation. The servant's world runs on intuitive nods, steady glances, and barely noticeable gestures. When you cross paths with another servant, there's a flick of the wrist to signal acknowledgement, a tilt of the chin to communicate sufficient supplies, a clipped motion that means all is clear. It's a quiet, fluent language built out of necessity for speed and discretion. Verbal words would only slow the pulse of this palace, distracting from the work that never really stops. At times, the scents in the air alone guide you. Every section of the palace seems to carry a distinct aroma, clear enough to mark your location without ever opening your eyes. Prayer rooms cling to thick layers of incense, frankincense, balanced by the sharper tones of cedar resin. Walkways near the quarters for Pharaoh's children smell faintly sweet, scrubbed with citrus oil to hide the mess of young royals who don't always obey their attendants. Then there's the unadorned corridors, used only by those in your rank. They hold a simple dryness, a neutral tone of fresh dust mixed with the faint hint of leftover lye from yesterday's floor washing. The pace of your movements changes as the sun climbs. Early morning is controlled and steady. There's room to breathe, space to balance. But as the palace wakes, urgency begins to weave itself into the air. The pharaoh's schedule dictates pace, every room prepared to meet the precision of divine timekeeping. To a noble, the word lateness might suggest poor manners. In the world of servants, timing is sacred, a direct reflection of your respect for the living God. Failure? That is not seen as inefficiency. It is an insult. It's no accident that the palace corridors can so easily confuse. Some halls seem to loop endlessly into themselves, twisting into identical turns that lead nowhere. Others abruptly terminate at smooth, featureless walls. This design is deliberate, a way to disorient outsiders and protect sanctified chambers. Those who don't belong here, envoys, spies, even thieves, would find themselves lost within minutes. You, however, travel these paths without thinking, instinct pulling you forward faster than memory alone. The painted walls surrounding you blend into the background most days. Years ago, they fascinated you, but now their warnings and tales skim past your thoughts. You know them, of course. The hippo hunt, where a hunter spears the beast with impossible aim. The priest, his skin painted deep blue to mark him as divine. The goddess mourning, blood streaking her tears across stone. Each scene speaks, but not to you. To you, they have become markers for direction, no more meaningful than a doorway. One corridor, near the western wing, always makes your shoulders tense. It echoes too much, a trapped stillness that clings to your skin. You know better than to linger here, no matter how well lit or inviting it may seem. All servants learn quickly that this hallway leads too near to the crypt rooms. The air smells stale, a little wrong even to your nose. The others don't linger there either. Every movement you make is deliberate, light steps, shallow breaths. In these palace veins, you move like a ghost. You're not meant to be seen, not truly. Because no one notices the blood keeping the walls alive, unless it stops flowing. You stand barefoot in silence in front of the pharaoh's private chamber. The air feels heavier here, heavier than anywhere else in the palace. Even the faintest sound seems absorbed by the stone walls, as though they too know the sanctity of this space. This is not just a bedroom, not in the way you'd imagine. It is a sanctuary for a living God. Every detail within these walls, from the painted motifs to the careful placement of furniture, exists with a purpose greater than you can speak aloud. You shift your weight slightly on the cold stone beneath your feet, waiting for the senior attendant's nod to enter. No one steps into this room alone. Every chore, every movement carried out here is choreographed, dictated not just by royal expectation, but by traditions older than memory itself. The first task is always the same. You gently take up a fan, your motions precise and unhurried. This is not about coolness or luxury. There's another reason entirely. Stagnant air is thought to attract evil spirits. It clings too easily, rests too long. The fan sweeps steadily back and forth, an almost rhythmic motion, softly clearing the space with invisible strokes. The room must breathe, even in stillness. You fan the air not for the pharaoh himself, but for the unseen, chasing away anything that might dare intrude on this sacred space. The centerpiece of the room is, of course, the bed. Unlike any sleeping space you've seen elsewhere in the palace, it stands raised and imposing, carved with lion legs that seem ready to spring to life. Layered with the finest linens imported from faraway lands, The bed isn't remade carelessly. Each fold of fabric is straightened with deliberate care, each corner tucked as if overseen by the gods themselves. The softness beneath the hand is undeniable. A reminder that this, too, sets Pharaoh apart from all others. It has to be perfect, not just for him to rest, but because the act of preparing it is an offering in itself. You step next to the door and lift a small ceremonial dish. In it lies natron water, its faint, salty tang filling the stillness. Natron, a mineral once used in mummification, serves another purpose here. Sprinkled near the threshold, it purifies the path to the chamber, a silent barrier that cleanses all impurities from the living God's domain. It's as if the act whispers that even in life, the Pharaoh's connection to death cannot be disputed. You were never told this, not directly, but the meaning is as solid as anything else in this room. In the gentle light of early morning, you place freshly gathered lotus petals near the pillow. Their pale, waxy forms are not for beauty, though they are striking. They are offerings, delicate symbols of regeneration meant to please the divine aspects of the Pharaoh. Sleep, for him, is no ordinary act. It's thought that as he slumbers, the Pharaoh transcends his human form to become Osiris, god of the dead, and when he wakes, emerges anew as Horus, the soaring falcon of the living. You know this without fully grasping it. What matters is the ritual, the precise placement of the petals, the offering made real. Even the chair near the corner, a stool by most measures, carries its own strict rules. It serves no casual purpose. You were warned never to sit on it, even in exhaustion. There's a story among the servants of a young boy who dared rest there late one evening when no one was watching. He disappeared the same day. The others fill in the missing details: punishment, exile, perhaps even a sacrifice to the Nile itself. It's enough that you never entertain the thought. The walls themselves shimmer faintly as you clean, catching the low light in golden specks embedded in their surface. It's not a trick of the eye. The paint, mixed with powdered gold, is deliberate. The chamber must reflect sacred light, making the very surfaces alive with divinity. This room is not meant to be dull, not even in shadow. Your movements are silent and measured as you dust the edges of jars and fold fabric. You are taught never to turn your back on the Pharaoh's resting place, but to face it with reverence while keeping your eyes low. Always face the god, they told you, but never meet his eyes. By the time you leave, there will be no trace of your presence. No fingerprints on alabaster, no misplaced lotus petal, no wrinkle in the sacred linen. When the chamber is ready, it must seem as if the gods themselves passed through. And when you step out, the heaviness of the room remains with you, settling into your bones, a silent reminder of your place in the orbit of this divine shadow. Before the sun fully asserts its power over the palace, you're in the sacred halls, gripping the handles of an incense burner. The smell is already inescapable, sweet and smoky, with a sharpness that catches faintly in your throat. It clings to you, burrows into your hair and skin, and doesn't loosen its hold for hours, sometimes days. You'll even catch the scent in your sleep. The air is heavy with it, coiling and rising, but there's no room here for discomfort. Burning incense isn't just a ritual, it's law. The temple priests treat it as an invisible barrier, a purifier so essential that even the thought of it going wrong turns every task into a silent, nervous test. The blend itself is ancient, entrusted to a few hands. You've mixed resins under the eye of a meticulous overseer. Frankincense from the land of Punt, myrrh from Nubia, and the kaifi blend that carries a harmony of honey, raisins, cinnamon, and wine. The combination isn't random. Every ingredient has been chosen for what it represents and how it reacts with flame. Together, they form a mixture that takes hours to grind, shape, and prepare so that all of it can be burned to ash within seconds. Its sweetness is deceiving. This is not for human enjoyment. The smoke is meant for gods, a vessel to transport prayers and offerings into the unseen spaces of the divine. The priest directing the ritual is quiet but watchful. He doesn't address you directly, but his eyes flick between your hands and the slow curling trail of the smoke. If it rises unevenly, too fast or too weak, he'll look at you in silent accusation. Bad smoke, he'll say, angers the gods. Once, a servant accidentally set too much resin alight at once, sending thick, choking plumes through the temple room. He wasn't seen again after that day. Whether the gods were displeased or simply a head priest with no tolerance for error, no one dared ask. Your hands ache from the heat of the charcoal bowls. Their metal edges carry the burn of the embers, and you've learned to balance the burners with a grip that avoids touching the hottest spots. Still, the stinging is inevitable, and you've practiced in pretending it doesn't hurt. The expectation is clear. No flinching, no hesitation. Steady hands are a sign of reverence. Flinching might be seen as weakness. Weakness could be interpreted as doubt in the power of Pharaoh, or worse, the gods above him. Soon, this room will host the Pharaoh himself. The air must be flawless, not overpowering, not faint. There's a belief passed down without question that the gods recognize Pharaoh by smell before sight. It makes you wonder if anyone smells this way without his title. The thought vanishes just as quickly. It's not your place to ask such things. But it becomes clear in this moment, when you light the incense, you're not simply burning resin. You're shaping the image of divinity itself, crafting the intangible aura of what it means to stand this close to the gods. You've heard whispers about the incense itself, how precious it truly is. Some temples had incense recipes written in guarded scrolls, locked away as if they were treasures. Few scribes, if any, ever saw the formulas in full. One stolen recipe could mean disaster for an entire temple. Sometimes you feel the same weight when preparing it, as if mixing the wrong amounts could undo something sacred and much larger than yourself. The room's ceiling looms far above, carved and painted to resemble the stars. As the incense rises, thin wisps stretch upward into the dark expanse, disappearing as if they've been consumed by the heavens themselves. It's mesmerizing in its way. Your work, vanishing, yet necessary. Power leaves no trace, they say, except for its scent. You think of the day you got too close, the smoke filling your lungs and making you cough involuntarily. A guard had grabbed you by the collar, dragged you back into the servant corridors before anyone important heard your outburst. It hadn't gone further than a stern warning, but the sharp memory keeps you mindful of every movement. The scent lingers even as the burners are carried away. You catch it on your wrists, your hairline, even your clothes long after the flame has died. It's no longer just resin or smoke. It becomes something heavier, something tied to this place. Power has a smell, and it stays with you no matter how far you try to carry it away. He is coming. You feel it before you see anything, before a single sound breaks the stillness. It's the way the air changes, sharp and heavy, as though the rooms themselves are bracing. A subtle rush sweeps through the servants standing by, quiet feet stepping back into the shadows, quick motions to make way without a word spoken. The scent confirms it, an unmistakable blend of perfumed oil, lotus, frankincense, and something darker, something richer, like resin burning just beneath the surface. No one dares pause to observe. The Pharaoh is near, and invisibility is your only defense. The moment demands precision. You drop to your knees instinctively, forehead pressed flat against the cold stone floor, arms bent and tucked close to your body. Your heart hammers against your chest, louder than your breathing, even though you've practiced this bow more times than you can count. It feels the same each time, a strange mix of terror and routine. You tell yourself to keep still, not to tremble. Every part of your training screams to you, the same warnings you've heard for years about what happens to those who falter. An older servant once spoke of someone who sneezed during a procession. The story is always followed by the same grim conclusion. They were sent to work the quarry pits, breaking stone under a scorching sun until they collapsed. A mistake like that doesn't just end your duty, it erases you. From this position, all you see is a portion of his hem. The bottom of the royal kilt, gilded and finely embroidered, brushes softly against the air as he steps. Even here, at the edge of your sight, the folds sparkle faintly, catching the narrow light as if they command it. His sandals are a marvel of craftsmanship, inlaid with crushed turquoise that gleams like water. On the strap of one, if you glance carefully enough, a cobra seems to coil, its head carved with such precision that it almost feels alive. Every detail reminds you that what walks past you is not simply a ruler, but something greater, an extension of divine will. Stories swirl about him, though no one speaks of them in the open. Rumors say he walks not alone, but in constant communion with the gods. The faintest rustle of his robes as he moves could carry their judgment at any moment, like whispers passing unnoticed by most ears. You wonder, what did they just say about the servants in his path? What do their celestial voices think of you in this moment of submission, head down, motionless as stone? Trailing him is another figure, equally silent yet unmistakable. The queen moves in a shroud of translucent linen, veiled so finely that it catches and reflects the murmurs of light around her. Her presence is like smoke, intangible yet pressing, as though you can feel it even without looking. You wouldn't dare raise your head for even a glimpse. It's said that doing so draws misfortune. Or worse, suspicion. Servants whisper that the nearest look toward the queen could be interpreted as temptation, a thought that carries punishments too frightening and undefined to risk. The symbols of his power pass by in quiet clarity. The flail and crook are held not as weapons, but as signs. They represent more than discipline and guidance. They enforce the truth you live under every day. He owns everything beneath him, including you. These symbols, carried so casually in his hands, are weightless compared to the shadows they cast over your life. The training runs so deeply now, it even follows you into sleep. Once, an older servant claimed he dreamt of standing before the pharaoh and forgot to bow. He woke the next morning with a nosebleed. No one told him it was a coincidence. Everyone believed the gods were sending a warning. It's enough to make you coil tighter in dreams, even when they cannot see you. The sound of the royal footsteps begins to fade, softer with each passing second. You stay frozen until the silence stretches unbearably long. Then, and only then, do you lift yourself slowly, arms aching, heart still pounding. No looks are exchanged between the others around you. No one dares breathe relief aloud. Still, the thought hangs unspoken between all of you. I'm still alive. The Pharaoh's first breath is more than a moment of waking. It is a ritual in itself. It's said that when he exhales for the first time each morning, Ra, the sun god, breathes through him. The act merges the mortal and the divine, binding the daily rhythm of the kingdom to his physical existence. This single breath is sacred. What follows it holds even more weight. His first words are believed to shape the day, not just for the palace, but for the entire kingdom. Would it be a day blessed with good fortune or cursed with disfavor? Even the possibility of hearing his voice fills the halls with quiet expectancy. You don't witness this ritual directly. That privilege belongs to the highest ranks of attendants and priests. Instead, your presence lingers on the edge of the process. You and others help carry in the fresh morning offerings, though nothing is touched by your hands. The tray laden with figs, dark loaves glistening with honey, lotus blossoms too perfect to seem real, and small jars of beer is balanced on a polished stand that you hold at arm's length. Every movement is deliberate. To stumble would do more than spill the offerings. It would invite questions, punishment, and perhaps worse, a sign of divine displeasure. The high priest's role is central here, and his ritual precision is unmatched. He carries the tools of the opening of the mouth ceremony, typically reserved for statues. Today, though, this ancient rite is directed toward a living god. A small wand shaped like a lion's tooth is held close to the pharaoh's lips. Deliberate gestures and sacred symbols are drawn in the air to awaken speech. Not ordinary speech, but words imbued with divine resonance. Within those first words, it's believed, lies the power to influence the Nile's flooding, the harvest, and even the gods' favor. Everything begins here, at the edge of his whispered breath. Not every pharaoh relied on the priests for this act. Some, like Akhenaten, were said to embody such direct connection to the gods that they required no intermediaries at all. Their breath alone was believed to sustain the sun's unbroken journey across the heavens. This belief, passed down and amplified by generations, made every servant's work feel both small and impossibly large. You know your touch on an alabaster jar or your careful folding of linen earlier this morning has shaped this moment indirectly, but profoundly. To serve the God King is to serve the unseen. You hear it, finally. Not the words themselves, but the shift when his voice breaks the silence. Attendants ripple back into action, some carrying news of his speech further down the palace corridors. A soft chant rises, followed by the low hum of a conch shell, marking the gods' awakening. Today's words reach your ears through a relay of murmuring servants. "The day will be long, let there be shade." It's a simple phrase, yet layered with purpose. His smallest instruction reshapes your morning. In the hallway, you swiftly adjust the angle of the fabric curtains draped over the windows, ensuring the passageway remains cool. Even this, seemingly minute, carries a sacred weight. Standing there, the scent of lotus blossoms still faintly caught on your skin, you feel something unexpected. It's not joy or even relief. It's somewhere between pride and fear, a sharp awareness that even the smallest motion of your hand contributed to this pivotal moment. Somewhere beyond layers of screens and symbols, the living God has taken his first breath of the day. The sun rises quickly now, its glare bouncing off the pale limestone walls, turning the palace grounds into a dazzling display of light and shadow. Long, angular pools of shade stretch across the packed earth, offering temporary relief as you walk. The procession begins in silence, a slow and steady movement of servants, each burdened with offerings cradled in both hands or balanced carefully on shoulders. You grip your basket tightly, its woven sides biting against your palms. Every step deliberate, every breath controlled. This isn't the time to falter. Ahead of you, the temple gates loom, massive and imposing. They're a work of art as much as a barrier, painted with vivid scenes that feel almost alive in the morning glow. Serpents writhe and coil in brilliant colors, their forms being pierced by gods adorned with crowns and scepters, eternally caught in the act of slaying chaos. You've stared at those scenes 100 times before, long enough to memorize every curve and line. And still, they evoke the same tension in your chest, the same tightening of your grip on the basket. There's comfort in repetition, but also the heavy reminder not to misstep. Not here, where even the smallest failure becomes the weight of judgment. Inside your basket lies today's offering. It smells rich, fragrant, almost overwhelming in its variety. The figs are plump and dark, carefully chosen for their even ripeness. The bread loaves glisten under a thin glaze of honey, their shapes pressed neatly by skilled hands. Jars of sealed beer rattle quietly as you move, each lid coated in wax to preserve the liquid within. There are garlic bundles, sharp in scent and piled methodically, and near the top, the most striking contribution, a goose, its body plump and smooth, its preparation overseen to ensure it is exactly as required. There cannot be flaws. A bruised fig or a fractured jar is more than a disappointment. It is an offense. An imperfect gift risks suggesting that imbalance has already crept into the day, and no servant, least of all you, intends to be the cause. The scent grows stronger as the procession nears the gates. Combining honey's sticky sweetness with the earthy tang of beer, the faint metallic hint of blood, and the dense musk of incense, the air is thick and heady. It clings to you, making every step feel slower, weighted. No one breaks the silence as the line of servants moves forward, each carrying their burden, each lost in their thoughts of what waits at the gates. There's fear in it, mingled with devotion, but no one would admit to either. When it's your turn, you carefully step forward, the towering gates crowded with carved deities watching your every move. A temple attendant, dressed in robes cleaner than you'll ever wear, waits to receive the basket. His expression is blank, uninterested, but every motion feels scrutinized. You lower the basket gently, hands steady, eyes fixed deliberately downward. You do not look at him, nor do you glance past the gates. It's an unspoken rule. That barrier, as grand as it is, separates your world from theirs. Beyond it lies the temple, where priests move in carefully staged rituals, where sacred animals roam spaces you will never enter. This is close enough. The priest assigned to inspect today's offerings approaches, his gaze sharp and precise. He lifts the basket lid and lets his eyes dart through the layers. The figs, the bread, even the goose are all examined with quick, practiced scrutiny. A blemished pomegranate once caused a commotion, a story every servant knows. You watch him now, holding your breath despite yourself, scanning his expression for any sign of displeasure. Finally, He nods. Relief floods through you, though you keep it hidden, your face practiced in remaining a blank slate. Behind the gates, faint sounds of ritual rise, carried on the wind. The sistrum rattles, its rhythm delicate and haunting, interwoven with low, resonant chanting. The voices are strange to you, their words sacred and therefore forbidden for your tongue to repeat. It sounds, you think, like a lullaby for stone, the patterns of devotion too old to question, too heavy to hold. Near the entrance, geese bound for sacrificial rites flutter and hiss at the commotion. It's said that animals destined for offerings sense what's coming. Some believe they feel the presence of death. Others say they feel the gods themselves. You bow deeply as the process ends, then step back 3 paces as is required. Turning your back before a signal would be taken as disrespect, so you wait for the priest's final dismissal before retreating. Another day, another tribute carried out without fault. The sun continues its climb, warming the shadows you had briefly relied on. And as you return to your duties, the scent of the offerings lingers faintly on your clothes, along with traces of your survival. Once again, the gods have accepted their gifts. Once again, the day moves forward. When the Vizier speaks, it's like the air in the chamber folds in on itself. No one breathes too deeply, and no one speaks if they haven't been summoned. The Vizier's words are not divine proclamations, nor are they royal commands, but they weigh heavier than both. Everyone knows a single phrase misinterpreted by this man could erase your existence. He may not sit on a throne, but his reach spans every grain store, every temple column, every worker's chisel. And today, you stand at the edge of that reach, gripping a tightly sealed scroll you've been forbidden to read. The wax feels like it's burning through your palm. The space around you is hauntingly quiet, broken only by the soft scratch of red pens moving across papyrus or the faint shuffle of linen robes brushing stone floors. A scribe murmurs your name to announce your presence, and you move forward. It feels more like being pulled forward, even though no one touches you. Your body knows what to do, spine curved, eyes low, movements restrained. The Vizier's chamber is stark, but suffocating. Not in size, but in weight. It's not the unadorned walls or the towering scroll racks that press down on you. It's him. His presence, seated on a low dais at the room's center, radiates control. There's no need for gold or jewels here. His authority doesn't need display. You dare not look directly at him, but you notice the ring on his hand as it hovers over a nearby scroll. The gleaming seal of Ma'at, the divine symbol of truth and order, burns its shape into your memory. The ring is said to hold the kingdom accountable, balancing every decision on the fragile scale of justice. But to every servant or official who's crossed him, it's a reminder that justice is not always mercy. I balance justice, and you are the weight I measure, they say he's whispered to those on the wrong side of his ledger. He doesn't acknowledge you immediately. His attention remains fixed on a sheet of papyrus. His gaze flicks across the rows of calculations and decrees, not as a man reading, but as a man scanning for flaws. They say he dreams in numbers and ration records, that he can see a corrupt granary official hundreds of miles away simply by reviewing tax figures. An iron ox of the state, his shoulders bear the burden of the kingdom's machinery, storehouses, temple construction, the harvest, foreign diplomacy, even the day-to-day schedule of the living God himself. The silence is heavy as you kneel to place the scroll on the mat before him. It's tied with a thread of crimson, marked for urgency, maybe even danger. His fingers hover before breaking the seal, not immediately acknowledging your presence. That moment feels stretched, like your role in the room is being calculated, scrutinized. The rumor among the servants is that the Vizier has no tolerance for accidents or whispers left unheard. His reach extends far outside this room and into the countryside itself. Governors, priests, even minor nobles all bend to his decisions. Some say he rules in Pharaoh's shadow more securely than anyone in Pharaoh's light. There are governors who fear him more than armies. He dips a brush into red ink and marks the bottom of the scroll before rolling it shut, signaling the end of this exchange. You know red ink means divine orders, sacred notices, or execution decrees. Your body fights the urge to imagine which fate that ribbon of color seals inside. As you're about to stand, his eyes flick toward you, sharp as the edge of a lance. The glance is brief, barely half a second, but it leaves you carved open, cataloged, and dismissed all in the space of a breath. Behind him, the ever-silent guards stand motionless. One has a visible scar running across his cheek. He is rumored to have commanded men in battle across Nubia. The other, paradoxically, has lips oddly sealed. A man whose tongue was removed years ago for speaking when he shouldn't. You don't linger on their presence or try to decipher more about them. You've learned not to let curiosity overpower survival. Your limbs stiffen as you step back out of the chamber, careful not to turn your back until you exit. The moment you pass the carved wooden doors, air fills your lungs again. Not fully, but enough to remind yourself that you're still alive. You delivered the scroll. For now, that is enough. You kneel on the smooth palace walkway, the sun barely warming the stone beneath your knees, and work the reed brush over the cracks between flagstones. Deep in these spaces, the dust hides, clings stubbornly, and refuses to leave without being scraped out. This isn't just about cleanliness. This is holy ground, and when the pharaoh walks, even the shadow of dirt must not exist beneath his gilded sandals. Your back aches from crouching, but you don't notice anymore. You've done this so many times it's routine, yet the pressure to make it flawless never fades. There's a moment that flashes through your mind as you work. The one time a fellow servant let you see the pharaoh's sandals up close. They rested on a pillow of indigo linen, shimmering in the dim light, crafted from gold so fine it reflected shapes even in the near dark. Every strap was carved perfectly, and the bottom bore delicate images of foreign enemies, tiny figures etched to be stepped on with every royal stride. It was deliberate. With each step, Pharaoh asserted his rule, even over those who had been long conquered. The fact that you're here, hunched over this stone walkway, is proof enough of his dominion. The dust seems endless. Even as you clear away one layer, another stray breeze brings fresh sand from the desert. You feel it sting your face, gather in your hair, and stick to the sweat on your skin. A memory flickers. The priests you once saw inside the temple courtyard, using nothing but soft feathers to dust the statues of the gods. Their movements were smooth, practiced, serene. In contrast, you clutch this worn brush, your hands raw and blistered, pushing and grinding until the stones beneath you are spotless. Divine statues may get feathers, but for the ground Pharaoh walks on, you're the only tool they need. Your hands are dry and cracked. The gritty stone fights back against your fingers every day. You know better than to ask for ointment. Those around you would laugh, maybe scold. There's no special care for servants like you unless blood shows under your nails. Some of the older workers insist this builds endurance, while others quietly claim no one cares because no one notices. Either way, you know you'll feel the sting of your work long after the day ends. As you work, a noblewoman approaches. Her sandals press against the dustless path just as your brush leaves it. Instinctively, you lower your head, stilling your movements. Her thin linen robes trail just above the sweep of your knees, and for a terrifying heartbeat, she pauses. In that suspended moment, cold dread rises in your chest. Does she see a mistake? Is she about to accuse? Then, her jewelry jingles, the sound growing softer as she moves on. You don't breathe again until the faintest echo of her steps has faded completely. You've seen the royal sandal bearers in training, a sight that makes you both awed and unnerved. They don't just carry footwear, they become part of the pharaoh's rhythm, matching his pace so seamlessly they appear as extensions of his body. Every step must be measured, every movement deliberate. Mistakes aren't an option. There's a rumor about a servant who once stumbled and scuffed the royal sandal during a temple procession. He wasn't punished publicly, but his bedding was missing from the sleeping quarters that night. By morning, no one spoke his name again. The dust around you feels alive, persistent. Even after hours of your work, it will return by evening, scattered by the desert winds. It waits as you do, quiet, unnoticed, and easily erased when it becomes inconvenient. You've learned this much. The most dangerous moments come when you're no longer invisible. Until then, you brush, you kneel, and you wait. For the dust, for their footsteps, for the next task that must be done. The scroll rests in your hands, heavier than it should be for a roll of papyrus. It isn't the weight of the material, it's what it represents. Wrapped in soft linen and sealed with red wax marked by the pharaoh's cartouche, the scroll feels alive. The raised imprint of Horus's eye glares up at you from the seal, a silent warning not to fail. You were told it's treason if that seal is broken before it reaches its destination. Treason doesn't mean exile or whipping. It means disappearing entirely. Sometimes in the jaws of a crocodile, sometimes in chains sent south to Nubia. You grip it tighter. You think back to the scribe who handed it to you. He didn't meet your eyes. He didn't explain what was inside. The instructions were simple and final. Do not run, do not speak, do not stop. He left no room for clarification, just pressed the scroll into your hands and sent you on your way. Now, every step feels like a test, every corner a new layer of risk. You don't need to know what's written. Orders of such urgency could only mean two things: blessings or death. You'd rather not guess which one it is today. As you move through the palace corridors, the silence amplifies everything around you. The dull shuffling of your sandals, the cool weight of the scroll on your damp palms, the faint sound of wind pressing against thick walls. Guards line sections of the halls, motionless. Some don't bother glancing at you, while others seem to stare straight through you like predators lying in wait. Their spears catch the dim light, and you notice the faint etching of hieroglyphs along one shaft, a prayer for precision. Rumor says some of these men have never spoken a single word in years. Silence, after all, guards secrets more tightly than iron locks. You pass a monkey tethered by a gilded chain near the corner where the southern wing begins. It belongs to one of the nobles, a gift from Nubia you've overheard. The creature shrieks as you near, and the sound bounds off the stone walls, sharp as a blade. You flinch despite yourself, clutching the scroll closer to your chest. The guard beside the animal doesn't so much as blink. His stillness is unnerving. You imagine he'd react the same if entire walls crashed down next to him. He watches you for a second too long, then returns to his perfect, deadly posture. The scroll becomes heavier the closer you get to your destination. A pull tightens in your chest as you approach the doorway where the Chamberlain awaits, flanked by attendants. The Chamberlain wears gloves, thin, white, and spotless. He doesn't speak when you bow and hold out the scroll. His fingers pinch the wax seal, inspecting it for even the tiniest crack. The tension stretches unbearably, but then he nods, accepting the package. He slips it out of your hands with effortless authority, and its absence leaves your arms feeling oddly empty but no less tense. You bow 3 times, each lower than before, then step back. Now, it's someone else's problem. The corridor feels longer as you leave, each echo of your footsteps a reminder of what you carried, the Pharaoh's voice, bound in ink and wax. What you don't know is whether that voice held mercy or doom. What you do know is this: someone's world has just changed, and for one terrifying moment, the change relied entirely on your hands. You swallow hard, still feeling the smooth linen burn against your palms, and rejoin the current of invisible servants in the palace's endless veins. You weren't supposed to see her. It was just another delivery, a routine task to bring the perfumed oils to the Queen's antechamber. The small alabaster jars were balanced carefully in your hands, their polished surfaces unnervingly smooth. The air in the hall outside was heavy with stillness, broken only by the faint strains of a harp echoing through the distant corners of the palace. You moved with precision, keeping your footsteps soft against the smooth floor, your eyes trained low. No one warned you what was beyond the violet-dyed curtains, but no one needed to. You knew to place the oils and leave quickly. No pauses, no glances, no hesitation. But then, something different. The curtain shifted, not from the breeze, but because of her. The Queen herself emerging unexpectedly, framed by a beam of sunlight slanting through the high windows. She stood still, radiant in a way that silenced the entire world around you. Her presence blanketed the space, shrinking it into something sacred. Your instincts kicked in before your thoughts could catch up. You dropped your gaze at once, fixing your eyes on the polished floor beneath her feet. But it wasn't fast enough. The moment hung in the air. A breath long, no more. Her gaze caught yours before you looked away, and your body froze. The Queen walked with an elegance that demanded no announcement. No fanfare trailed her, though the soft movements of her perfumers and handmaidens followed close, their presence whisper quiet. She did not need words to control the room. Everything shifted with her, as though the balance of the palace moved effortlessly within her step. Whenever she paused, the air itself seemed to bend, lighter but somehow suffocating, like the scent of blue lotus that lingered faintly in her wake. The whispers about her from the servants' quarters were soft and vague, but always edged in tension. They said she could command not just men, but judgment itself. "She can have a man executed with a glance," one servant muttered once, barely audible in the dim firelight of the sleeping quarters. No one dared to ask if it was true, let alone test the claim. But standing there, with your pulse hammering in your chest from the faint flicker of her gaze, the statement didn't feel like an exaggeration. It felt like gospel. Her beauty was not just physical, it was cultivated, deliberate, divine. Braids of dark hair caught faint glimpses of gold thread as they moved delicately across her shoulders. Her lips were stained in the richest crimson, a pigment made from crushed carmine beetles claimed to be valued higher than gemstones. Even her scent, sweet, spicy, layered with cinnamon and rare oils, was forbidden to those outside the upper courts. You knew this because you handled the oils, sealed in jars to be used only by her attendants. You'd never touch their contents, but the faint traces left on the containers lingered enough to act as a warning. This scent belonged to no one but her. The queen's role reached far beyond beauty or ceremony. The quiet murmurs of the court spoke of her influence over Pharaoh himself, not as a whisper in his ear, but as his equal in council. Some claimed she was the one who dreamed with the gods, translating divine messages Pharaoh could not decipher alone. Others suggested she commanded those dreams, bending their interpretations toward her will. A servant might never know which story held truth, but you could feel her power even from the shadows of the antechamber, a force more enduring than the limestone walls themselves. And yet, what lingered most in your mind was that glance. It had been brief, too short to hold weight, too fleeting to matter. But you knew it would return to you, replaying itself against the backdrop of sleepless nights and aching muscles. Had she seen your fear, your clumsy twist away? Was her gaze curious, dismissive, amused? Or had it been nothing at all? Just one more invisible moment to her divine existence. You would never know, but the memory burned sharper than any reprimand could. Later, when you thought the encounter had already slipped into the unspoken void between servants, your supervisor found you. His fingers gripped your arm tightly, a warning etched into his scowl before his words came. "Eyes down next time," he muttered. His voice was low but forceful, the kind that leaves no room for a response. You nodded quickly, ashamed and scared at once. But deep inside, buried beneath years of obedience and faceless labor, a small, defiant whisper stirred. She saw me. In a world that expects you to remain unseen, even a single glance from the queen could stretch into eternity. The shouting starts before the sun has fully spread its light over the palace walls. You hear it echo from the lower southern gate, where the laborers from the Valley of the Kings have gathered, their voices sharp and loud. These are not the muffled tones of palace workers or the disciplined commands of guards. These are raw sounds, filled with anger. It travels like a ripple through the stone halls. The laborers who have come are not slaves. They are skilled workers, craftsmen who spend their waking hours cutting eternity into the cliffs, carving Pharaoh's immortality deep into the rock. And they have had enough. A foreman steps forward, facing the palace steward. He drops to his knees, arms spread wide in a gesture that looks almost like supplication. But his voice betrays him. There is no pleading in it, only fury. "We were promised rations," he says, each word carved like stone itself. "We bleed for the gods. We are starving." The steward says nothing at first. He stands stiffly in front of the foreman, and the silence stretches. You stand to the side, gripping an empty basket tighter than you should, as if that tension alone can make you smaller, more invisible. The laborers wait, their faces hard and eyes narrowed. There is no ceremony here, no quiet reverence for the palace. Their hands are blistered, their skin baked red from years in the sun. Linen wraps their feet where sandals have long since disintegrated. These men bow only to Pharaoh's image, and perhaps not even then. Finally, the steward snaps a command your way, breaking the stillness. You're ordered to fetch baskets from the storerooms, bread loaves, dried onions, salted fish. The usual rations. But today, the word urgently hangs more heavily than the baskets themselves. You move quickly, navigating the storerooms carved into shaded corners of the palace, your sandals scuffing against the cool stone floors. The air is stale here, heavy with the smell of grain and stored provisions. Bread baked yesterday, its crust hardening beneath the weight of time, is piled together in woven crates. It's loaded up and heaved onto your shoulders faster than you thought possible. You know what's at stake. When you return to the gate, the tension among the laborers has not softened. Now they formed a makeshift line behind the foreman, their ranks solid and unmoving. The steward hesitates for a breath, then adds more to the offering: a jar of beer, a handful of dried dates. The weight of the extra provisions makes the baskets sag on your arms, but this isn't about generosity. It's not about meeting their demands either. It's about survival. The laborers know they are the ones who breathe life into Pharaoh's afterlife. Without them, the tomb stays unfinished, the divine cycle interrupted. They hold more power than most care to admit. A priest watches the scene unfold nearby, muttering something you can't quite hear. Though his tone suggests displeasure, one of the laborers hears him. He spits into the dust with deliberate defiance. "Then the gods can carry the stones themselves," the man says. His voice is loud, unshaken. It earns audible murmurs of agreement from others. The priest turns pale, for no one expects such a reverence in the shadow of the palace. The baskets are distributed without ceremony, and the laborers say nothing as they lift the food. They shoulder their burdens as they do every day under harsher conditions, muteness giving them a kind of strength. Their chantless march back towards the cliffs is as unsettling as their arrival. No thanks, no acknowledgement, just their backs retreating into the rising light, leaving dust and silence where their voices had burned so loudly. That evening, as the sun sinks lower and the palace begins to quiet, you hear the faint echoes of their voices once again. It isn't a prayer or hymn, it's something rough, raw, and different. A chant of hunger, of frustration, carried by tired men who demand recognition, even from the gods to whom they build eternal houses. The storeroom is one of the few places in the palace where silence feels natural. Cool and shaded, it smells of dry earth, grain, and the faint tang of oil. Jars, bolts of linen, and rows of amphorae line the walls, stretching into the dark corners where even the faintest light doesn't reach. This is where offerings are counted, where goods meant for temples and tombs are stored. It's where you've been sent countless times to fetch spices, jars of oil, or fresh linen, always moving quickly to avoid notice. Today feels no different when you first push through the heavy wooden door, the weight of routine pulling you forward. Something stops you. You're not alone. You freeze just inside, letting your eyes adjust to the dim light. At first, it's only whispers, low and sharp, coming from behind a neatly stacked row of amphorae in the far corner. You shouldn't be here, not now. But curiosity roots you to the spot. The words slip through the air, just clear enough to catch their shape. Temple account lists 30. There are only 22. You don't move. You don't even breathe, but your heart starts to beat harder, louder. You know voices carry in rooms like this, and worse, you recognize one of them. A scribe whose face you've seen before in the hallways, his hands always stained faintly with ink. Carefully, you step back and crouch low behind a basket of lentils. You know what this is before the full conversation unfolds. It's theft. Disguised, covered, hidden in the safety of numbers. Temple accounts, sacred ledgers meant to track offerings to the gods, verified by priests themselves, are supposed to be untouchable. But even within palace walls, numbers can disappear. A missing crate of grain, a few jars of oil quietly rerouted. It happens rarely, yet often enough to know it's not unheard of. You move quietly, keeping your position just far enough to hear without being seen, though every instinct screams to leave. One of the voices lowers, almost inaudible now. "The Vizier's eyes are elsewhere this week," spoken so casually, yet filled with danger. The Vizier, the man who dreams in ledgers and breathes punishments with the ease of a sigh. If his attention really is elsewhere, it's no wonder they'd take their chance now. A scribe, with his access to accounts, and a merchant's son, who you can only assume provides the means to turn missing goods into wealth. But your position feels fragile, precarious. You weren't meant to hear this. No one was. Your grip tightens on the edge of the basket as something shifts. A sudden scrape of pottery. You look down, realizing too late it came from your foot. A clay jar near you tips over onto the packed dirt floor with a dull crack. The sound cuts through the shade like lightning. Silence follows, not the emptiness of the room, but the charged quiet of being discovered. Then come the footsteps, fast, deliberate. You bolt before they've rounded the corner. Out of the door, up the stairs, and into the open air. Your chest heaving, your heart pounding like a drum in the temple high above. You don't stop until the storeroom is far behind. That night, when the palace falls into its usual hum of quiet, you scrub the floor of the servants' quarters harder than usual. The jar's echo still rings faintly in your memory. You say nothing. Of course you don't. In the palace, everyone guards gold, jewels, and grain. Whispers? They are far more dangerous. Words, once heard, cannot be unheard. And secrets, as you're painfully aware in this moment, live longer than even the most divine kings. In the corners of dimly lit rooms where the air feels still and heavy, the scribes sit. Their forms are unassuming, cloaked in plain linen, with only the faint stains of ink marking their profession. But their eyes see everything. You might think you're alone as you sweep through the corridors or deliver yet another basket of grain, but if a scribe is nearby, you are never truly alone. They don't rise, they don't shout commands, but they don't have to. Their tools, the sharp reed pens, the scrolls unrolled across low wooden desks, are far more powerful than any whip or sword. You pass them with your eyes firmly on the floor. It's instinct now. These men don't live in gold and finery like the priests or palace nobility, but their words carry more weight than most of Pharaoh's guards. A single stroke of ink can turn a servant into a ghost. You've seen it happen. A nervous boy once carried bread late to the priests after morning rituals. The scribes noted the time, the discrepancy, and the name. The next week, his mat was gone from the sleeping quarters, and no one spoke of him again. The scroll held no space for excuses. Once written, it became truth. The scribes themselves speak rarely, but when they do, their words cut sharply. Simple phrases, chilling in their precision, noted, recorded, forwarded to the Vizier. That last one is the most feared. When something reaches the Vizier through their pens, it's no longer personal. It becomes a verdict. You avoid their gaze because it feels like they're always watching, drafting a version of your life you might never get to defend. Their skill starts young. Scribes are educated in dedicated schools known as the Houses of Life, where they learn to write, calculate, and commit vast records to memory. By the time they graduate, some can write in 3 different scripts: hieroglyphic, hieratic, and demotic. It's said that no detail escapes them, whether it's the amount of oil an offering jar holds or the exact shade of ink mandated for divine commands. Their training transforms them into guardians of history and administrators of order. Even the pharaoh relies on their meticulous work. Without scribes, the divine voice of Egypt would falter. Even death doesn't release them from this duty. The most accomplished scribes are buried with small wooden models of writing tools, miniature palettes, brushes, ink pots. Alongside these, priests place spells meant to keep their hands steady in the afterlife. Eternity, it seems, holds no mercy for cramped fingers or misspelled accounts. A scribe's work transcends the narrow boundary of life and death, ensuring their precision remains sharp even amidst the shadows of the Duat. Once, you dared to glance at the edge of a scribe's papyrus as you walked past. The scroll was lined with columns of names written in neat, methodical rows. Next to each, you noticed numbers, perhaps wine rations, perhaps wages. You didn't see your name among them. The sharp sting of exclusion wasn't comforting, though. It simply reminded you how replaceable you are. Names written in neat ink hold permanence. Unwritten ones dissolve into silence. The older scribes with weathered hands seem intense but predictable, focused on keeping their accounts balanced. It's the younger ones who unsettle you. Quiet, watchful, less predictable. Their stillness feels deliberate, as though they already know what's coming. You wonder sometimes if they see more than ledgers. As you pass them, a gnawing fear picks at you. Do they know your mistakes before you even recognize them yourself? You lie in the dim servants' quarters that night, surrounded by the low hum of others breathing in their sleep. Yet, it's not the chants of priests or the faint steps of passing guards that echo in your mind. It's the memory of a reed pen scratching across papyrus, slow and deliberate. Your life in the palace feels tenuous, like ink waiting to dry. And perhaps, in some cold corner of this vast palace, it has already been written. The task seems simple when it was first given to you. Deliver a sealed tablet to the high priest's attendant. It wasn't your first time carrying messages through the palace corridors, and it wouldn't be your last. You accepted it without question, the way you always do, and began the careful walk toward the temple wing. The tablet was small and heavier than papyrus, its surface cool against your palm, sealed with wax bearing the sharp impression of an official insignia. You kept your grip steady, aware that the wax seal must remain intact. But simplicity can erode in a heartbeat. It happened so quickly, a misstep near the stone threshold of the next corridor. The tablet shifted, slick with the sweat from your hands, and it fell forward just enough to knock against the rim of the basket you carried with your other hand. A soft crack sent a cold rush of panic racing up your spine. You froze mid-step and looked down. The wax seal was fractured, not completely broken, but enough to expose a glimpse of the scratched writing beneath. For a moment, you thought about continuing on as though nothing had happened. But then your eye caught the faint slant of the marks visible under the edge of the broken wax, and you hesitated. You told yourself not to look. "Rewrap it," your thoughts screamed. "Fix the linen and deliver it before anyone notices." But your fingers didn't obey. They unfolded the tablet just slightly, enough to take in the words etched hurriedly into its surface. "The Queen suspects. Delay the burial. Speak only when the stars align. Your breath caught." The phrase bristled with meaning that was beyond your rank to unravel. But even without context, you understood enough. These words told of something far larger than a simple delivery, something dangerous. You shouldn't have read them. Your hands shook as you rewrapped the tablet, your breath shallow. With the tablet secured again, you moved as quickly as you dared, turning sharp corners and keeping your head low. The hallways were no longer just grand passages of polished stone. They had begun to feel like narrow tunnels, as though they pressed closer with every step. Each sound around you, the distant chatter of attendants or the shuffle of a guard's sandals, felt too loud, like it carried the secret branded into your memory. You clutched the tablet tight to your chest, wondering who in this sprawling palace would know you had seen what wasn't meant for your eyes. Messages like this weren't always straightforward. Some were designed to hide their full meaning, and you couldn't stop yourself from wondering if you'd even seen the entire secret. Invisible inks made from lemon juice or heat-sensitive dyes were sometimes used to conceal instructions detectable only under the right conditions. Was the phrase you read only part of a larger plan, pieces locked away beyond what your accidental glance could reveal? The uncertainty burned. The longer you thought about it, the worse it felt. That night, sleep was impossible. You checked the door to your sleeping quarters 3 times before lying down. Even then, every sound made you flinch. The distant ring of metal off stone, the scuffs of unseen footfalls passing beyond the wooden door. When a kitchen servant in your corridor failed to return that night, your sense of unease deepened. It was probably coincidence, you told yourself, but some part of you gnawed at the thought. Maybe they had overheard something too. Maybe they had been seen. Maybe they had been punished. When dawn broke, the palace returned to routine as though nothing had happened. Guards patrolled their usual places. The prayers over bread and offerings echoed in practiced rhythms. You moved among other servants, blending back into invisibility. But every passing gaze felt heavier, every motion scratched at the edges of your nerves. You would speak to no one, not about this. In a place where the walls themselves seemed to listen, carrying another man's secret felt like carrying a dagger, unseen and ready to cut. You've walked past the entrance to the Forbidden Wing countless times. The tall stone doors standing eternal and unyielding at the far edge of the palace. Hieroglyphs shimmer faintly on the surface, and their meaning is unmistakable. This is not a corridor for the uninvited. Few speak of what lies beyond, and when they do, it's always in hushed tones, cloaked in fear or reverence. It has many names among the servants, but most call it the Silent Wing. The title fits. It carries an ominous weight, like a story meant to be forgotten. Rumors swirl endlessly. Some say it houses ancient scrolls inscribed with forbidden knowledge. Others whisper of relics from an earlier dynasty, or even embalmed priests and royal children whose names were struck from records. What's true? No one knows, because no one dares to ask. This morning, a senior servant thrusts a small bundle into your arms. The linen wrapping is clean and tight, the object inside heavier than its size suggests. "North Hall," they mutter without meeting your eyes. "Don't linger, don't touch anything." The destination flickers in your mind with immediate clarity. The Forbidden Wing. You hesitate for only a fraction of a second, long enough to feel dread coil in your stomach, tightening like a drawn string. But to refuse is unthinkable, and so you nod, wordlessly accepting what you cannot prevent. The air shifts as soon as you step past the threshold. It's colder here, as though the sunlight outside refuses to touch this place. Your footsteps echo unnaturally, doubled and distorted in a way that makes it hard to tell whether the sound is yours alone. Even the faintest noise reverberates, creating a haunting presence that feels one step behind you. The scent is strange, heavier than the usual aromas of the place, resin mixed with something earthen, something ancient. This place smells like stone that has held secrets for centuries. The walls are blank, unpainted. Every other part of the palace bursts with life. Vibrant murals of gods crossing the heavens, Pharaoh smiting his enemies, fields erupting with grain. But here, the stone is bare, indifferent. It feels deliberate, meant to unsettle. You pass narrow doorways on either side, each one marked above the lintel with an eye of Horus carved deep into the stone. These doors have no handles, only faint cracks where they meet the frames. Your curiosity flares despite your caution, but the stories are fresh in your mind. How some servants claim that peering through the cracks left them blind, or worse. You force yourself to keep your head forward, gripping the bundle tighter. The hallway stretches longer than you expect, its shadows pooling in corners where the torchlight doesn't reach. The air grows heavier, pressing against your chest. Finally, you reach your destination, a plain pedestal placed awkwardly beneath a thin, dark curtain. You hesitate as you place the bundle down, your skin crawling with the sensation of being watched. On instinct, you glance to the side. Through the edge of the curtain, your eyes catch a glint of gold. A massive sarcophagus, too large and ornate for obscurity. It's not Pharaoh's, you realize, but a predecessor's. Why it's been hidden there, no one would ever explain. You quickly divert your gaze, unwilling to linger longer than you should. On the way back, your pace quickens, though you fight the urge to break into a run. The silence feels alive now, the corridor narrowing around you. At the edge of your vision, you notice something, a figure at the far end of the hall, hooded, perfectly still. You blink, and it's gone. You keep your eyes down and move faster. By the time you cross back into the familiar parts of the palace, your chest is tight and your breath is shallow. Later, in the servants' quarters, someone catches the paleness in your face and the tremble in your hands. "Forbidden Wing?" they ask quietly. The words settle like dust. You manage a single nod. Their hand brushes your shoulder and they lean in, voice softer now. "Then forget it, now. And you know, as much as you've seen, you will never speak of it again." The priests move through the temple like they're made of the stone columns themselves, silent, deliberate, untouched by anything earthly. Their heads, smooth from ritual shaving, catch the faint light of the torches. Their robes, so white they could blind you under the sun, sweep soundlessly across the ground. Always ahead of you, always unreachable, they glide through sacred spaces as if the gods themselves hold open the doors. You follow behind, unnoticed and unspeaking, with bare feet that scarcely whisper on the polished floors. The objects you carry, bowls, incense, small jars of oil, are things no one has explained to you. You know their names, their shapes, their weight in your hands. But their purpose belongs to the priests, not you. You never utter the prayers they chant. Their voices rise and fall like the Nile at flood season, carrying ancient words you've heard 1,000 times but never truly learned. You mimic their steps, not their invocations. Your silence is what supports their noise. Without you, there would be no incense to burn, no sacred liquids to anoint, no vessel to catch the water when they wash their hands. You play your part, so small it could be erased as easily as a misplaced hieroglyph, and yet, you know, remove even this and the ritual collapses. Their path is carved into your memory, sharper than any chisel could carve it into stone. Through the towering hall of columns where the air smells of age and power. Past the glimmering waters of the sacred lake, which never reflects your face even when you glance at it. And finally, to the inner sanctuary, where only Pharaoh and the high priest are permitted to step. You stop, as always, at the same threshold. The thick cedar door, carved with the names of power, is an immovable boundary. Once, you thought you heard the faintest echo of laughter beyond it, breaking through the murmured prayers and rattling sistrums. You couldn't decide whether it was joyful or terrible. Sometimes you wonder if the gods are even listening. Do they hear the chants, the music, the careful ceremonies? Or do they listen only to the power behind those actions, to the authority that decreed them necessary in the first place? The thought both opens your mind and presses down on your chest like a great stone. And then you see the high priest pass by, his breath sweetened with natron pellets, a faint sheen of perfumed oil on his hands, and you keep such musings locked tightly inside, at least for now. The priests' purity routines are legendary. Shaving not only their heads but their entire bodies, washing more times in one day than you do in a week, refusing certain foods that might defile their spirits. You overheard that strong scents, besides those ordained for offerings, are considered polluting. Even their breath must remain pure, as if the gods themselves might lean close enough to catch a whisper. There was a time you admired them. Then, you watched a priest slip while holding his ceremonial staff, which clattered loudly onto the floor. The air in the temple froze, so heavy with tension you thought it might crush you. Nothing happened to him at first, no rebuke, no reprimand. But the following week, he was reassigned to care for the embalming chamber, alone. The acknowledgement you receive here is rare and brief. A flicker of movement, a nod so slight it might be carried away on a soft breeze. It is not kindness, you understand, but recognition. A reminder that you're one small thread tightly woven into the divine workings of the palace. And on days when the sistrums rattle and the chants rise in perfect rhythm, when the scents of sacred perfumes fill your lungs, you feel something stir. Something close to eternity, just out of reach. It happens before you even realize it. A task no different from the dozens you perform each day. A tray of ceremonial wine placed just so by the threshold of the offering room. But as you lean forward, the lip of a jug off-balances and a faint splash hits the stone. A drop or two, nothing more. It sinks into the grout before you can blink, vanishing like it was never there. You might have convinced yourself no one saw, that the wine was absorbed into the floor and into the room's silence. But things don't vanish here. Not mistakes. Not ever. The first sign comes in the supervisor's glance, or lack thereof. Until now, their gaze often rested on you in brief acknowledgement, calculated but solid. Today, They pass you without a word. You bow deeper, but it's as if you've disappeared. The other servants notice this too. They avert their eyes, leave your side more quickly than normal, and their whispers barely carry beyond your reach. You try to keep your back straight, but the air itself feels heavier in every corridor you walk. There's no proclamation of guilt, no whip raised, no closet isolation. And yet, you feel it, the sharp, unspoken judgment clinging to you like the humidity in the air. You replay the moment over and over, your mind stubbornly circling the edges of it like a lost bird. What you can't change presses harder with each detail. Where exactly you placed your hand, how the jug tipped, the seconds lost before you thought to clean it, hoping to erase even the shadow of a spill. But someone saw. Someone always sees. Even if it's through layers of hierarchies you'll never reach, a word has risen. And in a place like this, a single word can spread faster than the Nile's waters at the flood. You take extra care with every movement now. You walk quieter, bow lower, carry double-checked trays, and dare not breathe louder than the priest's evening hymns. Your tasks don't seem lighter, only etched with more weight. Each action feels like a scaled judgment where balance hangs precariously. Here, some call it the way of Ma'at. The invisible order is everywhere, the sacred code of harmony that must not be disturbed. Disruption, whether accidental or intentional, is not something the gods forgive lightly, nor does Pharaoh. There's a name you hear whispered between breaths, a former servant long since vanished. He dropped a ceremonial feather, his punishment swift but unspoken. Now the words spoken of him are heavy with rumor. Reassigned to an obscure crocodile breeding station along the Nile. Nature decided the rest, one voice said, hushed and sudden, as though nature itself might overhear. Crocodiles do not share forgiveness either. Your punishment, for now, hangs like a crocodile's shadow beneath dark water, not striking, but inevitable. Days pass and you scrub the wine stain again and again, though the stain itself is long gone. What matters isn't the stone's appearance anymore. It's the act of scrubbing as if the fervor of your effort alone could reach the gods. Yet the marks of scrutiny remain, an unreturned bow from a priest, a scribe brushing past in silence instead of a customary nod. Sometimes these absences are louder than words. In the hours before sleep, you stare upward from your reed mat. The ceiling of the servants' quarters is barely illuminated by the flicker from distant torches. With no one to hear you, your lips move slightly, not in a prayer for mercy, but for forgetting. If they could only look away, let this moment pass, let you fade back into invisibility. Because in your world, a single stain, the tiniest mistake, presses down harder than 1,000 hands. A mistake may be gone from sight, but never from memory. The day begins in darkness. Lamps flicker long before the first glow of dawn, and the air is sharp with the crisp, earthy smell of bread loaves baking in clay ovens. Today, the palace buzzes with a quiet urgency, movement, murmurs, the unmistakable sense of something sacred. It's a feast day, a moment when gods demand not just worship, but indulgence. And you, despite your weary limbs and bowed head, are at the heart of it. You're handed a basket as the overseer directs you. It's heavier than it looks, filled with figs so ripe they're almost splitting, their dark skins glistening in the dim light. Beside you, others carry dates, almonds, roasted ducks spiced with cinnamon. golden honey cakes stacked high, glazed pomegranates, and beers brewed from lotus flowers. Every item is inspected meticulously. No blemish, no perfection, no sign of decay. If even one offering is flawed, you're the one that will answer for it. Each movement requires focus. You're instructed not just to carry these items, but to treat them as though they've already been touched by divinity. There's something weighty in that thought. Somewhere along this process, these ordinary foods will cease to be mortal. They'll transform, essence drawn out through rituals far beyond your understanding. You wonder if the gods would choose you over the bread if they were forced to pick. When you reach the preparation room, golden trays and carved bowls await their contents. They are polished until they gleam, reflecting the flickering light in sharp flashes. You can still hear whispers about the servant who left a thumbprint on a silver serving dish. What happened next was never clear, but the story ends with his name disappearing from palace lists. You suppress a shiver and wipe your own hands on your tunic before reaching for a tray. As you set the table, every detail serves a purpose. The arrangement, you've been told, mimics the cosmic order. Bread loaves, stamped with Pharaoh's woven cartouche, line the edges. These loaves are seen as embodiments of Pharaoh's spirit, connecting him to the sun god Ra, whose light will soon pour across the horizon. The most vibrant garlands of herbs and lotus flowers frame the center. Meats are hidden behind jewel-toned fruit, where even their aroma is meant to mix in harmony with the offerings. Music echoes faintly from a distance, harps plucking notes that resemble the ripples in the Nile, soft flute melodies threading through the room, and rhythmic bursts of sistrums filling the gaps like pulse beats. Servants aren't permitted to pause or turn their ears toward the rhythms, but you can't ignore how the notes guide your movements, subtle threads in the fabric of this grand act. They control the pace of your hands and feet. When the priests finally arrive, they move with deliberate grace. One, the high priest, carries the smell of cedar oil and the faint smoky essence of resin. His voice is low, steady as he leans over the altar. You stand at the edge of the chamber, far from the sacred boundary. In his hand is a single bowl of wine. When he whispers to the gods and tips it slightly, the fresh steam rises off the top in faint curls. This fleeting moment, the exact second the wine's warmth dissipates, is when the offering transforms. The meal is no longer yours, no longer meant for any mortal. It belongs now to the gods of Egypt. Hours later, when the last tray is removed and you're left to clean, your fingers run over the surfaces where the food once laid. They feel warm, sharper somehow, as though the plates held something too powerful for human hands. You haven't eaten since the night before. Your stomach protests, and in the back of your mind, you dream briefly of tasting one of those golden cakes. But instead, you wipe down the bowls and sweep the stray crumbs made by gods. Beneath your exhaustion, there's a strange, quiet pride. You did not feast, but for a brief moment today, it was your hands that touched eternity. When the feasting ends, when the priests finish their chants and the musicians set their instruments aside, you're summoned. Not to serve, the Pharaoh has already eaten his fill, but to clean. The grandness of the scene has faded, the air is heavier, and yet the room still feels full. The Pharaoh's table, though quiet now, thrums with an invisible energy. You step carefully into the chamber, letting the silence settle over you. The low flicker of oil lamps casts long shadows across the polished stone. The table stretches out ahead of you, massive and elegant, though no longer pristine. Gold goblets sit half-filled, their rims stained with deep red wine. Rinds of pomegranate and curls of fig skin cling to the polished wood. A roast duck leg, untouched but gleaming, rests atop a platter. Nearby, wine stains sprawl across the linen like marks left by hurried brushstrokes. The room smells of rich spices and faint smoke, the remains of a feast reserved for divinity itself. Even in disarray, the scene looks almost ritualistic, as if the gods themselves had dined and left behind their traces. You wait, your hands at your sides, until the priest overseeing the chamber gives the faintest nod. It's all you need to cross the threshold and approach the table. The task is simple: cleaning, scrubbing, polishing, but it feels more significant here. Where other places demand efficiency, this room calls for reverence. You gather the fruit peels and wine-soaked linens, wrapping each item with the kind of care you reserve for holy objects. There is no rush. This table, still humming with something sacred, is different from the others you've tidied. The table itself commands your respect. Carved from cedar brought across the sea, it gleams with inlays of ivory and lapis lazuli that catch the faint light. Once, curiosity got the better of you, and you let your fingers skim one of its legs. It was smooth but cold, and in that brief moment, you felt something strange. A kind of weightless chill ripple through your hand. You never dared touch it again. Some whispered that the pharaoh's table was more than just a place to dine, that its carvings honored Pharaoh's ancestors. In fact, you've seen dishes carefully prepared and placed at empty seats, offerings meant for kings whose reigns have long ended. Here, even the dead remain honored. The quiet of this task is its own comfort. For once, in a day filled with commands and noise, no one shouts instructions in your ear. No priests hover, no supervisors correct your stance. You hum softly as you work, the tune barely audible, an old lullaby about the Nile that your mother used to sing. Here, no one tells you to stop. These moments feel like your own, a rare space where your mind wanders freely. As you reach to reposition a wine jug, a strange thought flickers. For just a moment, a memory surfaces, a story you once heard about feasts from long ago. You pictured yourself at this very table, not as a servant, but as a guest. The food is yours, golden loaves of bread passed from hand to hand, laughter brightening the air. The image is sharp and sudden, but it vanishes quickly, like mist under the morning sun. It was never a possibility, just a flicker, gone as quickly as it came. When all is clear, the leftover bread is carefully wrapped. You've overheard that it might go to the temple for offerings, or, on rare lucky days, trickle back to the servants' quarters. Not to you, most likely, but the thought lingers. The faintest hope is enough to curb the pangs of hunger that have clawed all day. As you step away from the massive table, hands empty, you realize your pace has slowed. The chamber feels different than the rest of the palace. All the weight of your day seems to lift here, even if only briefly. And for that short time, standing in its stillness, it feels like this place belonged to you. It begins in the hallway, as so many things do, quietly, subtly. You're on your way back from carrying fresh jugs of oil, your arms aching but steady. Then, a voice, faint but sharp enough to slice through the monotony of footsteps and murmurs. "He knows! Say nothing!" It's hardly more than a hiss, cutting off the instant you step into view. You glance around as casually as you can manage, but the hallway is empty. Your heart beats faster, yet your steps don't falter. You tell yourself it wasn't meant for you. That night, though, you begin to doubt. When you return to your sleeping quarters, the faint light of an oil lamp reveals something unusual. A dark smudge under your reed mat, perfectly straight and deliberate. Charcoal. You know the meaning instantly. Among the servants, such marks are rare but unmistakable. A warning. Someone wanted you to see it, but what it warns against, or who, it doesn't say. Your chest tightens as you lower yourself cautiously. Is it a gesture of protection? A threat? Perhaps both. You feel eyes on you, even here. The mat beneath you feels no softer than stone, and for the first time in months, even the rhythmic croak of frogs outside does little to soothe you. The next day brings little comfort. As you arrange incense jars in the storeroom, your fingers brush against the rough, worn stone behind one. A symbol, faint but unmistakable, has been scratched behind the jar. A snake tied in a knot. It takes a moment for the recognition to land. You've seen it before, etched deeply into the leather belt of a former palace guard. He was one of the men reassigned abruptly to a distant position. No one ever heard from him again, although stories bubbled up through the cracks, stories of betrayal, poison, and disappearances. You pull back your hand quickly, as though the symbol itself might strike. The atmosphere grows stranger. You notice an unfamiliar servant near the high priest, his simple linen tunic blending so perfectly into the surroundings that most would dismiss him entirely. But not you. His movements are careful, too careful, his gaze lingering on faces and corners longer than it should. When his eyes land on you, you instinctively lower your own, pretending to focus on the task at hand. Still, the hair on the back of your neck rises. He isn't here to carry trays or shine vessels. His purpose is something else entirely. You've heard rumors about these men, palace watchers hidden in plain sight. Spies whose very existence contradicts the whispers of divine harmony the priests chant about. Even queens aren't above their scrutiny. Who employs them? That's the question no one asks aloud. They could be reporting to the Vizier directly, or to someone even closer to Pharaoh's seat of power. It doesn't matter. What matters is this. They see, and what they see does not disappear. Later that evening, you are sweeping an antechamber when a scribe passes close by. He says nothing, but you notice the papyrus he carries slip from his hand as if by accident. It lands near your feet, unscrolling slightly. Your eyes betray you, flicking onto the page. A single phrase leaps out before he reaches down, snatching the scroll back without a word. The servant heard too much. You swallow hard, every muscle in your body working to suppress a visible reaction. The scribe does not stop or look back. You continue sweeping as though nothing happened, but the words scratch deeper than the brush in your hands. That night, the fear is more tangible than the air in your lungs. You sleep facing the door, clutching your water jug close like a makeshift shield. The smudge of charcoal still stains your mat, daring you to forget its warning. By morning, your name is no longer on the duty roster. When you finally ask your overseer, their pause is just a fraction too long, but heavy enough to carry meaning. Hall 7, they say. Quiet work, no questions. You bow, keeping your face low, your pulse steady. You walk to your new task with measured calm. You don't look back. In the palace, those who flee are marked. And now you know. Shadows, once aware of you, never stop watching. It was an ordinary errand, one of countless others. You were given a roll of fresh papyrus and told to deliver it to the scribe's chamber. Routine work, the kind that didn't demand thought, just obedience. But when you reached the narrow corridor leading to the chamber, the door wasn't fully closed. It stood open by a finger's width, just enough for sound to escape. At first, it was nothing but indistinct murmurs. Then a single word reached you: Pharaoh. No chanting, no reverence, just the clipped, quiet utterance of the word. You stopped. You should have kept walking. That's the thought that would echo later. But your feet didn't move. Instead, you leaned closer, ears straining to hear more. Two voices spoke within. One was familiar, the senior priest, his tone sharp with urgency. The other, low and steady, belonged to someone you couldn't recognize. The exchange came in fragments, but the pieces were heavy. "The stars shift," said the priest, his voice trembling at the edges. "If he dies before the moon turns, the curse will fall on all of us." The stranger's reply carried no urgency, only calm resolve. "The queen suspects. The burial plans must be altered. He cannot die in Thebes." The words felt heavier than the papyrus scroll still clutched in your hands. You didn't understand it all, but you understood too much. This wasn't meant for you. This wasn't meant for anyone outside that room. Your breaths came faster, louder in your ears. You swallowed hard and forced yourself to keep walking. The sound of your sandals suddenly unbearable against the stone floor. That night, your name was absent from the work list again. When you asked where your duties had been transferred, you were met with silence and a pointed glare from your supervisor before finally being sent to torch duty in a quiet, unused hallway. The hallway was cold, the emptiness more oppressive than ever. With each breath, the torch in your hand flickered, its light dancing in ways that made the shadows look alive. The walls seemed closer, the air thicker. It was as though the corridor itself knew what you had overheard. Then came the signal. Another servant passed by you, his steps quick and purposeful. As he moved past, his wrist brushed yours, not by accident. It wasn't much, just the faintest tap, but it said everything. You were not alone. Someone else had heard. Someone else had pieced together enough to know the weight of what was happening. But what now? You didn't dare meet his gaze or acknowledge the signal. To admit knowledge was to invite danger. Both of you knew that. Pharaoh's tombs came to mind, not the gilded monuments everyone whispered about, but the hidden ones scribes occasionally hinted at. Tombs some kings built in secret to mislead robbers or scheming courtiers. The placement of a tomb wasn't just a theological matter, it was political. Even in death, Pharaoh wasn't safe from maneuvering. The plan you overheard, whatever it was, could alter both the living and the dead forever. And yet, the thought of such power twisting in the shadows left you cold. That night, as you lay on your mat, the images wouldn't leave. You saw a tomb sealed in black silence, but instead of Pharaoh's name on the wall, it was yours. There was no face, no eyes, only the absence of light. You told yourself to forget it, to let it slip away into the endless hum of palace life. But secrets don't lose their grip. Once heard, they burrow under the skin, impossible to silence. And in that overwhelming quiet, the truth became clear. Some knowledge wasn't meant to sleep. It lingers, sharp and breathing, just like the people who will protect it. You don't remember falling asleep. One moment you're lying down on the rushes, the faint sounds of others settling in for the night filling the air. The next, you're waking in a cold sweat, your breath uneven. The rushes beneath you are damp, sticking to your skin. For a moment, you feel nothing but the pounding of your heart. Then, the pieces of the dream come rushing back like floodwaters breaking through a barrier. Falcons with human eyes look down on you, unmoving, unblinking, as a voice called your name. It didn't come from a person, but from somewhere distant, behind the sun itself. The dream wasn't like others, fleeting and nonsensical. This one gripped you tightly, and even awake, it stirs unease in your chest. In the flashes you can recall clearly, the Nile flowed backward, its waters thick and dark, almost golden. The temple walls were slick and bleeding, not with paint, but with some molten, shimmering liquid. Off to the side stood a figure, half priest, half jackal. The lower half of him was human, clad in white robes, but his head was that of Anubis. He didn't move, only whispered, "He is not ready. Neither are you." His voice was soft, a hushed warning. You didn't understand it, but the words stayed with you even as you woke. They felt important, heavy with meaning you couldn't grasp. You decide not to tell anyone. Dreams aren't something to share lightly here. They're private, sacred, but when you arrive for morning duty, something feels different. A female servant hands you a water jug as usual, but her fingers shake. She doesn't meet your eyes. There's something distant, guarded in her movements. And that's when you notice it. She's afraid. Not of you, but of something else. Did she see the Nile turning in her own dreams? Did the falcons look down on her too? You don't ask. Neither does she. Maybe silence is safer. The priests speak often about dreams, though usually not to servants like you. Visions, they say, are chosen paths from the gods, warnings and commands bestowed upon the pure and the powerful. Deep in the temples, there are chambers designed for this kind of communion. High-ranking priests are said to sleep there, inhaling incense so thick it pulls them into waking dreams, hoping the gods will reveal omens or truths. You've heard that dreams are treated like scrolls, carefully studied, written down, and stored in the houses of life, the temple archives. They are not for people like you. Yet, as you carry on with your work, a darker thought gnaws at the edges of reason. But what if the gods weren't finished speaking? That night, you dream again. This time you find yourself standing in the pharaoh's chamber. It's vast and dim, but you know immediately something is wrong. The pharaoh sits upright, but he doesn't move. His eyes are open, empty, and filled with sand, grains spilling outward onto the polished stone. Behind him, the queen stands weeping silently. Her tears shimmer gold as they streak her face. Overhead, a hawk circles, its cry sharp enough to cut through the dream. It shrieks your name again and again. You wake with a sharp gasp, clutching at the edges of your rush mat as though holding yourself to the earth. This time, the fear doesn't wash away with wakefulness. It burrows deeper. The next morning feels heavier. As you gather your few belongings, you notice a priest passing by. Not one of the fanatical overseers, just a figure moving through. Normally, they'd pay no attention, but this time, he slows, pauses for the briefest moment, as if he knows. His head tilts, expression unreadable, before he moves on. Do they sense these things? You've heard whispers that priests sometimes see truths others cannot after rituals, but the thought chills you to the bone. Can they see inside your mind? Later, you pass the scroll room and find the door locked. You weren't heading there deliberately, but the sight gives you some strange hesitation. Then, you notice it. A single word scratched faintly into the wood near the frame. Watched. The message feels alive, humming under your skin. You step back and walk away quickly, head down. You tell yourself it's the heat or the endless labor that's making you feel this way. Stress, maybe. But this doesn't feel like stress. It feels like something is watching. Not with eyes, but with intention. The priests say dreams aren't just dreams. They're invitations, messages, or warnings sent when words cannot reach loud enough. But you can't help wondering about the voice in the dream, the whispers of the jackal-headed figure. Are you being warned, you wonder, or chosen? And if it's the latter, what might the gods want with someone like you? Judgment arrives quietly. There are no raised voices, no public accusations. In the palace, punishments don't need an announcement. They creep in, soft as shadows, leaving behind no echo. At morning roll, your name isn't called. You stand in the line longer than you should, waiting for an answer that doesn't come. The overseer doesn't glance at you, doesn't summon you forward. Instead, he nods, once, sharply, to someone behind you. You hear the sound before you feel it, the purposeful steps of two guards approaching. They don't speak, they don't give orders, they don't have to. You rise from your spot because you know. Everyone knows what this means. Around you, the other servants don't move. No one meets your eyes. It's not indifference, it's survival. To look at you, to acknowledge what's happening, would be to invite whatever hangs over your head onto their own. They pretend you don't exist, and in their silence, you already feel yourself vanishing. The guards lead you through corridors you've never seen. The walls are unfamiliar, bare of hieroglyphs or decorations. You've spent years walking and scrubbing the palace floors, but this part feels separate, meant for purposes never spoken aloud. The smell of resin is strong in the air, mixing with the damp chill of clay. Your footsteps echo against the quiet. You hold your questions tightly inside, even though they're building with every step. Why are you here? What will they do to you? But questions aren't for people like you. Here, questions suggest guilt, and guilt needs punishment. The room they bring you to is small, stark, and cold. Behind a low wooden table, a priesthood scribe sits bent over his scroll. Ink stains blot his fingers, and the delicate tip of his reed brush hovers over the parchment, waiting. He doesn't look up as you enter. He doesn't need to. His authority is clear in the stillness of his posture. "You were near the forbidden wing," he says, his words slow and precise. "You heard what was not yours to hear." The air stiffens around you. You open your mouth to respond, an explanation, a denial, anything, but nothing comes out. There's no point. It wouldn't change what's already happening. Innocence, you realize, doesn't matter here. Your presence near that place was enough. Your intentions are irrelevant. Judgment in the palace isn't about actions, but about their implications. It's about maintaining ma'at, the harmony of order, and a single thread pulled too far risks unraveling everything. The scribe doesn't wait for your defense. He marks something on the scroll with one quick stroke of his brush, a single symbol, finalized in black ink. "You will be reassigned," he says finally. "You no longer belong to the palace." The words hit harder than you expect. Not banishment, not imprisonment, just removal. You've been plucked away from the intricate machinery of the palace, your place erased as if it never existed. The guards lead you out a side gate you've never been through before. The stone here feels older, darker, as though it doesn't see much sun. They leave you at the edge without a word, their backs already turned by the time you realize what's happening. And then, the gate closes behind you. No slam, no echo. Just a finality that sits heavy as stone. You aren't dead, you aren't imprisoned, but you have been judged. And that judgment, a quiet, precise removal, carries its own kind of weight. You realize, standing there outside the palace for the first time in years, that no one will speak your name again within its halls. No one will acknowledge you existed there. You take a step forward, unsure of where to go. You aren't free, but neither are you enslaved. Something else altogether. Erased. In Egypt, even silence has permanence, and this silence will follow you like a shadow for the rest of your life. The sun rises as it always does, slow, golden, relentless. Its first light stretches across the land, catching the tips of the date palms and brushing against the water's edge. You lie on a mat so thin it barely separates you from the packed earth beneath. The cool morning air presses against your skin, and you're awake before the light fully unfolds. But this morning, something is different. For the first time in years, the familiar shadows of the palace's towering walls are not there to greet you. The world feels wider, emptier, less certain. You're no longer within the grand halls of the divine. Now, your place is a lesser estate along the river, not royal, not sacred, just functional. The scent of incense and cedar smoke is gone, replaced by dust, manure, and the faint metallic tang of morning dew. Your daily tasks are not polished with ceremony. Instead of delicately arranging temple offerings, your hands now carry sacks of grain, wrangling their weight against your body as the fibers bite into your palms. Instead of adjusting golden goblets on inlaid tables, you herd goats away from the stalks of barley, their bleating constant in the thick air. The only sounds are the shuffle of sandals, the creak of wood, and the endless buzzing of flies circling your every step. But still, you serve. Service lingers in you like a habit too deep to unlearn. Your hands remember every fold of fine linen, every bow made with perfect precision. Your posture reflects years of duty, even as your new overseers glance at you with mild disinterest. No one here questions where you came from. They don't ask why you move so carefully, why your silence carries something heavier than obedience. They see the way your eyes seem always half-turned inward, scanning before you look forward. They might guess that you came from somewhere higher, somewhere untouchable to people like them. But they never ask. And you never say. Sometimes, the absence of words is safer than all the stories you could invent. There are no priests here, no chants or sacred routines to follow. But the rituals still live in your bones. As you sweep the dusty floor of the storeroom, grains tumbling across its surface, you still whisper prayers under your breath, careful not to be heard by anyone nearby. At dawn, you pause your work to bow toward the slowly climbing sun, offering it the homage you gave it years ago in the palace shadows. You keep a small pouch of natron hidden, and when you remember, You rub its grains against your hands, cleansing them as though you might once again carry the pharaoh's food or holy oils. The gods, you tell yourself, are far away now, but your habits remain close. Throughout the day, the wind shifts, carrying traces of the capital with it. A faint scent of lotus flowers and a fleeting thread of burning cedar. The smell twists something deep inside you, a reminder of what once was. But memory is as fleeting as the breeze. Soon the scent is swallowed by the earthy familiarity of your new world. A younger servant, barely more than a boy with bare feet and nervous eyes, once asked you, "Were you ever in the palace?" His voice was quiet, but the curiosity in it shivered like a blade. You only smiled, saying nothing. Names can be erased, records wiped clean, but memories cling stubbornly. They settle on you like desert dust, impossible to brush off. The sun climbs higher by the hour, and with it, the work grows heavier. You walk barefoot through the fields, hardened by the day's heat, hauling more than you're ever asked to. Your steps are steady. Your body moves before the order is given. By the time others wake fully, you've already woven a dozen small tasks into the fabric of the day. It's automatic now, like breathing, like existing. Still tied to the rhythms pounded into you during your years in the palace. At the end of it all, you lie back on your reed mat, staring into the stars that scatter without pattern above. You no longer stand in the halls of gods, no longer walk behind their priests, no longer scrub the offerings of kings. But you are still a servant. The duties have changed, the stone walls replaced by open fields, but the essence of what you do remains. And somehow, that feels like a quiet kind of power, a reminder that your story has not ended. It has only changed where it's told. The daily life of a pharaoh's servant was one of silence, precision, and unseen devotion. They were the invisible hands behind Egypt's glory, each task a sacred duty, each mistake a risk to divine order. History remembers kings, but it was servants who carried the kingdom. Their resilience shaped a civilization. Want more untold stories from the ancient world? Subscribe and step into history's hidden corners.